taking the time to conclude your week with Bible Tract Echoes. This is your host, Micah McCurry. I'm joined by Pastor Joe Grimaldi. He's been with us all week for this week of broadcast. We've talked about some amazing things, and we're going to dive right back into something we concluded with yesterday. But before I do that, can I recommend to you that you visit our website, BibleTractsInc.org. We would love to send you some of our gospel literature, gospel tracts, completely free of charge. You can find more information if you grab a pen, a piece of paper. The announcer at the conclusion of the program will tell you a lot more about the options that are available for you. Now, yesterday and the day before, actually, we were talking about your father's testimony of salvation, and what such a powerful story. If you have not heard that, if you're just jumping in today, at the conclusion of this broadcast, don't tune out yet, but at the conclusion of this broadcast, go back and find the recording on our website, on your favorite podcast player. Just search Bible Tract Echoes. But we talked about how you and your sister and youth group and church and a myriad of people prayed for his salvation on a specific day, and it was really God's miracle for you. And for people that have maybe an unsaved relative, or they just have something that's pressing, a burning passion of something they need to see change that only God can do, what would be some action items, some practical application that you would give for them?
Well, first of all, I'd say this. My mother prayed for 22 years
Wow.
for my father to be saved. And we have to look at the widow with the unjust judge. Mm-hmm. And because of her importunity, because of her much asking, God finally answered her prayer. So the first thing I'd say is you have to be persistent. Mm-hmm. You've got to stay persistent in prayer. And then, secondly, I would say you need to be specific.
Right.
We talked about it was a specific person, my father, on a specific day.
Right.
And this is a kind of a piggyback story to that. Just a few years ago here, my son James, his wife Nicolina, well, not then his wife, he was engaged to this young lady, and he was bringing her at Christmas time to Ohio to meet the family. Mm-hmm. And my family, my daughter, my two daughters, my wife, my son-in-laws, they're all telling me, Dad, she's coming here because he wants you to lead her to the Lord.
Wow. No pressure, right?
Once again, here we go. Same story, right? It's just funny how similar the story is. So it just so happened Brother Coral's in-laws weren't doing well physically, and he called me and said, hey, that year, Christmas, the 25th of December, was on a Sunday. Mm-hmm. And he said, could I come over and preach for you? And I said, oh, sure. Well, when Dennis Coral preaches at your place, everybody gets saved, So I'm thinking this is it. She's going to come, da-da-da-da. Well, I get up Sunday morning, Christmas Day, and there's a message on my phone. Something had changed with their health. And he left. He said, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to preach for you today.
Wow.
So now it's back on me. But the wonderful part of that story was everybody in my family, not as long a period of time, is praying for Nicolina to be saved. And it's on me to, now that morning we did have several people saved, but she was the first person to raise her hand and with tears came to the altar to be saved. And here's the great thing. They drove because of bad weather and jobs. They got in that day on the 25th early in the morning. Mm-hmm. And because of the bad weather, they left before that. They weren't even here 24 hours.
Wow.
And she got saved. Yep.
Absolutely.
So, being persistent in prayer, being specific in prayer, putting your hand to the plow,
right, following
in
through.
prayer. Put some feet to the prayers. Mm-hmm. I understand, when people feel like, well, I just prayed about it. But if there's something you can do about it,
right,
that God puts on your heart to do it.
Right.
In all of these stories that I have, somebody put some feet to this.
Right.
And sometimes you need to put God to the test on something.
Sure.
Prove me this day, he said. Mm-hmm. And I realize mostly that's talking about giving, but I think God likes it when you're willing to step out by faith.
Right.
When you get out on the limb to where, it's either sink or swim time.
Right.
And I tell you what, I'll be honest, I hate it. When those experiences happen, God has done wonderful things for me. But man, there's times right before it happens when I think this is like the worst experience of my life.
Absolutely.
And then it turns into the best experience of my life.
Absolutely. So oftentimes your impact for God is only inhibited by your imagination and what you want and this is not some health, wealth, and prosperity gospel that I'm preaching right now, but what's that big thing that you actually do desire? Are you willing to put the work in on the prayer side, but then are you willing to follow through? I recall my great-grandmother, her name was Mabel Klein. She passed away at 96. She was a history teacher. I have some Jewish heritage, and she was a Jewish lady, Jewish history teacher, and she thought the Bible was just a good history book. That's what she thought it was. It had some good stories in there. She was witnessed to many, many times. I recall, as I could not have been more than 14 or 15, I witnessed to her, sat down, and I came in thinking, I'm going to be the vessel. I'm going to be the tool. God's going to use me. But I just got to be one of many. The amount of pastors throughout her life that witnessed to her. My dad, 1 week before she passed away in a nursing home, got to talk to her. He knew he needed to talk to her one more time. And God allowed the years and years of prayers to come to fruition at that time. All that to say, whatever it may be, yes, you need to pray about it, but you also need to follow through. There needs to be practical application, and you need to work at it. Now, if a Bible tract, if a gospel tract is the tool that you use, fantastic, but there are so many options. We were talking to some young men here at the camp we were at. They were asking how to lead their parents to the Lord, asking about brothers and sisters and friends, and there's, again, your imagination so often is the only inhibitor that you have. Now, we've talked about a little bit of your background. Well, I think we got through, of course, your father's testimony at Bible college, and we'll kind of speed through, unless you have another thought.
Well, there's one more thought I wanted to add, and that is this. Quite often, the person who is the most burdened about the situation is the person that God will use.
Right.
So often, we're very burdened for our loved ones, and we call the pastor, want him to go do it. Or we ask this one. I got to tell you a story from Minnesota. A man called me and said, would you go with me to visit my father? I'm so burdened for him to be saved. And if I mention the names, you'd know the names. And I said, I would be glad to do that. But I said, let me tell you something. You're the one with the burden, and you're the one that's been carrying the burden.
Yep.
Why don't you go and talk to him? Now, his father's father was in a nursing home, and he and his wife were there, and his wife led his grandpa to the Lord, right, not too long before he died. And I said, why don't you ask your dad to go to the cemetery and you're going to put some flowers or a wreath on Pap's headstone. And while you're there, say, hey, Dad, do you know what Pap did just before he died? Let me tell you. And that's exactly what he did. He went and got his father. They went to put a wreath or something on the grave, and he told the story and said, wouldn't you want to do that too? And in tears, his father got saved. And he thanked me profusely because I think I could have, I feel like I could have gone and won him.
Sure.
But it meant so much more that his son did.
Absolutely.
And his son had the burden.
Right.
The person with the burden is usually the guy God is going to use, the most, in my opinion. So, once again, I think it goes back to all of that, being persistent in prayer and putting yourself out there a little bit, being very specific, putting yourself out there, put some feet to those prayers. And then if you're the one that God's burdened, step up to the plate.
Right.
And don't try to pawn it off on somebody else. God's the one that does the saving anyway.
Right.
It's not me, it's not you, but you're the one that's going to miss the blessing.
Very few great works of God, I don't know if you could think of one, were done from a place of comfort.
Oh.
Oftentimes it takes that little bit, yes, it's some angst, a little bit of trepidation, some awkwardness, but that's so often what God uses to work.
Well, and absolutely, and we talked about this earlier today, and with someone, when there's a great door of opportunity, there are many adversaries.
Right.
So understand if there's a great door, you're going to have some adversaries. There's going to be some problems, some situations, some struggles. That shows you're probably on the right path.
Absolutely. Now, to double back on your past, and we'd cover this, I think, on maybe our Monday broadcast. You could find that on Facebook or YouTube. Our Instagram page is at Bible Tracts. We talked about your upbringing. We talked about your salvation, and in small part at least. Came through Bible college. Of course, you're married to Miss Kendra Grimaldi, and a great lady, a great woman of God, and appreciate her, and have 4 wonderful kids, and now pastoring. But you've been in the ministry for coming up on how many years now?
40 years this year.
40 years in ministry, and I had the privilege of working with and for him there in Akron, Ohio, First Baptist Church of Kenmore. Got to see some amazing things, and got to live through in my short time in ministry. Got to see so many awesome displays of God's power. One of the last things that we were able to do together there in that ministry was a kids' Christmas party.
Yeah.
We had 824 people on the property.
Unbelievable.
God did amazing things using just vessels like us. If we can do it, guarantee that you can do it with God's power, of course.
69 saved?
69 saved, I believe.
69?
So. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. No. It was 59 the previous year. It was 90 because we were praying for 100.
That's right. That's right.
So we came
right.
at 90% of our prayer requests.
That's right.
We'll take that for sure.
It was 90. That's
90
right.
people saved on that Sunday. I think it was December 22nd of 2019. I think was the date.
I think so.
And God used. We were privileged to be used by God for that time frame. But doubling back to, and we'll wrap up and conclude here, Bible tracts and ministry and the opportunity to be used of God in the next 2.5 minutes or so. For those out there that may desire to be used of God, looking for an outlet, whether it be just passing out tracts or cashier, maybe they feel God has them to have a future in full-time ministry. In 2 minutes, what would be your advice to someone that desires to be used by God, is not sure how?
Well, the first thing that I have to say is this. You have to be willing to allow anything in your life to be removed. When I got to the place at that teen camp where I was willing to say to God, whatever you want, I don't care. I mean, I didn't understand all these church rules and standards and all those things, but at this point, I didn't care. Right. Whatever it was you want me to do, you want me to, cut my hair into a mohawk and dye it purple. If that's what God really wants, then I'm going to do this. Right. I mean, whatever you want, God. There's nothing off limits. We're not going to argue about my dress. I'm not going to argue about my money. I'm not going to argue about anything.
Right.
Okay. So when you put yourself completely on the altar, then God can really use you. Mm-hmm. It's that place of surrender, and then being able to understand if you're that surrendered, whatever God's called you to do, He's going to equip you to do.
Right.
And you go out and do it. The first person I ever led to the Lord on my own, I led to the Lord reading a gospel tract to them. Right. I mean, that's all I knew to do. Right. I had never been taught. I didn't know what to do. The first time at a door, I told the story about the bikes and the kids, but I was at a door with my youth director a couple weeks later, and he talked to this older man, and he said, would you like to know how to be saved? And the man said yes, and he said, well, Joe here is going to tell you. And, he didn't tell me I was going to have to speak to somebody. I didn't know what to say. I had no classes. I took the tract that was in my hand, and I did the same thing that I'd done a couple weeks ago, and I said, well, let's read this together. Because it's all I knew.
Yep.
Look, if you just surrender yourself, you don't need any more information. God will equip you with whatever you need. What I knew was enough.
Amen. Now, if you've enjoyed this week of broadcast, I know I have. If it was just me, I think it was worth it because I had a good time. But if you did, if you would let us know, in all seriousness, write to us. You can find our email address online. I'll actually give it to you right now. It's info@BibleTractsInc.org. Our announcer will be on in just a moment with a lot more information. We would love to send you, he's referenced today, tracts, gospel tracts, no less than 3 or 4 times that Pastor Grimaldi has. We'd love to send you some free of charge from Bible Tracts Incorporated. This has been Bible Tract Echoes. I think at some point in the near future, need to have Pastor Grimaldi on for another week of broadcast. We'll save that for another time, though. Thank you so much for your listenership. We will talk to you very soon. Have a great day for His glory.